The crystalline spires of the draconian imperial palace pierced the purple sky of Xerion Prime like frozen lightning. Within the obsidian walls of the royal chambers, Prince Zephyr lay curled on his sleeping platform, his scaled form trembling despite the heat radiators that kept his room at the optimal temperature for dragonborn physiology. Unlike his father, the mighty dragon king Paraxes, whose crimson scales could deflect plasma blasts and whose roar could shatter mountains, Zephyr possessed pale silver scales that seemed almost translucent. Where other dragons of royal blood could breathe flames hot enough to melt starship hulls, Zephyr could barely produce wisps of smoke. His wings, meant to carry him across star systems, were weak and underdeveloped. The palace physicians had declared him defective at birth. A genetic anomaly, a disappointment to the ancient bloodline that had ruled the Draconian Empire for 10,000 years. Weakling, his elder brother Korath would sneer during royal assemblies. Father should have cast you into the void when you hatched. Zephyr had grown accustomed to the whispers that followed him through the palace corridors. Servants would bow formally, but he could see the pity in their reptilian eyes. Courtiers would speak in hushed tones about the cursed prince who brought shame to the dragon throne. Today was no different. As Zephyr struggled to rise from his sleeping platform, his muscles protesting with the familiar ache that plagued his body, he heard voices in the hallway outside his chambers. The king grows tired of his useless son, General Thrix was saying to Commander Vex. There are rumors he plans to exile the prince to the Outer Rim colonies. About time, Vex replied with a harsh laugh. A dragon who cannot fly or fight has no place in the imperial family. Better to hide his shame where the other worlds cannot see. Zephyr's heart sank. He had two hearts, as all dragons did, but both beat weakly compared to others of his kind. The thought of exile terrified him more than death. In the Outer Rim, he would be defenseless against the countless dangers that lurked in space. Pirates, hostile alien races, cosmic storms that could tear apart even reinforced vessels. As the voices faded down the corridor, Zephyr forced himself to stand. His legs shook with the effort, but he managed to walk to the vast window that overlooked the palace grounds. Below, he could see the training yards where dragon warriors practiced their aerial combat maneuvers. Their powerful wings created thunder as they dove and soared, their flames painting the sky in brilliant colors. He pressed his forehead against the cool crystal glass. Sometimes he wondered if it would be better to simply end his suffering. A quick leap from his tower window would solve everyone's problems. The Empire would no longer be embarrassed by his existence, and he would finally find peace. But something always held him back. A stubborn spark of hope that perhaps somehow he might find a way to prove his worth. That afternoon, as was his routine, Zephyr made his way to the palace archives. Reading was one of the few activities that didn't exhaust him, and the ancient texts provided an escape from his miserable reality. The archive keeper, an elderly dragon named Sage Corvin, had always been kind to him. "Ah, young prince," Corvin greeted him with genuine warmth. "I have discovered something fascinating in the restricted vaults. Ancient texts from the first days of our empire, when dragons still shared the galaxy with other intelligent species." Zephyr's eyes brightened with interest. History fascinated him, especially the forgotten chapters that most dragons ignored. "What did you find?" Corvin lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Records of a species called humans. They were considered primitive by our ancestors, yet the texts described them with a curious mixture of dismissal and fear." Fear? Our ancestors feared a primitive species? So it would seem. The records are fragmentary, but they speak of humans with an unusual ability to survive impossible situations. They called it adaptive resilience, or sometimes stubborn refusal to die. The text suggests that while humans lacked natural weapons, armor, or magical abilities, they possessed something our ancestors found deeply unsettling. Zephyr leaned closer, his weak voice barely a whisper. "What happened to them?" Corvin's expression grew somber. "The records end abruptly 3,000 years ago. Most scholars believe they went extinct, either through natural disaster or warfare with stronger species. But some texts hint that scattered populations might have survived in the Outer Rim, in places too hostile for most civilized races to explore." As Zephyr absorbed this information, an idea began to form in his mind. If these humans were as adaptable as the ancient texts suggested, perhaps they might know secrets of survival that could help him. It was a desperate thought, born of desperation, but it was better than simply waiting for exile or death. That evening, during the royal feast, King Paraxis made an announcement that confirmed Zephyr's worst fears. "My subjects," the Dragon King's voice boomed through the great hall, his massive form casting shadows over the assembled nobles. "It has come to my attention that our empire faces threats from rebellious colonies in the Outer Rim. Pirates and insurgents dare to challenge our authority." Zephyr felt his stomach clench as his father's burning gaze fell upon him. "Therefore, I am assigning Prince Zephyr to lead a diplomatic mission to these troublesome sectors. He will establish our presence and remind these distant worlds of their obligations to the Empire." The hall fell silent. Everyone understood what this really meant. Zephyr was being sent away to die, disguised as a diplomatic assignment to save face for the royal family. Prince Korath smiled cruelly from his position at the high table. "A wise decision, father. Surely our diplomatic brother will find great success in the Outer Rim." As laughter rippled through the hall, Zephyr straightened his shoulders. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. If he was to be exiled, he would face it with whatever dignity he could muster. But deep in his mind, a plan was forming. The Outer Rim was vast and largely unexplored. If any humans still existed, that was where he would find them. And perhaps, just perhaps, they might hold the key to his survival. 3 days later, as Zephyr boarded the small diplomatic vessel that would carry him to his exile, he carried with him only basic supplies and the ancient texts that Sage Corvin had secretly copied for him. The ship's crew treated him with barely concealed contempt, knowing they were essentially delivering a funeral. As the ship lifted off from Zerion Prime, Zephyr watched his homeworld shrink away through the viewport. He might never see it again, but for the first time in his life, he felt something other than despair. He felt possibility. The diplomatic vessel Sovereign's Pride had been traveling through hyperspace for 2 weeks when the first mechanical failure occurred. Zephyr was in his quarters studying the ancient texts about humans when the ship's artificial gravity flickered and died. The sudden weightlessness sent him floating helplessly toward the ceiling, his weak muscles unable to control his movement in zero gravity. Captain Vorth's voice crackled over the intercom with barely concealed irritation. "Prince Zephyr, we are experiencing technical difficulties. The gravity generators have failed, and our hyperdrive is showing critical errors. We must drop out of hyperspace immediately." As the ship shuddered back into normal space, emergency lighting bathed everything in an ominous red glow. Zephyr managed to grab a handheld and pull himself toward the viewport. Outside, instead of the familiar purple nebulae of civilized space, he saw only the cold emptiness of the Outer Rim. Distant stars glittered like scattered diamonds against the infinite black. "Where are we, Captain?" Zephyr asked when he finally made it to the bridge, his voice weak from the exertion of moving through the ship without gravity. Captain Vorth, a scarred veteran dragon with bronze scales, consulted his navigation charts with obvious displeasure. "We are in the Epsilon sector, Prince. Uncharted space. Our hyperdrive failure has stranded us approximately 300 light-years from the nearest Imperial outpost." The crew exchanged meaningful glances. Zephyr could read their thoughts clearly. This was the perfect opportunity to rid themselves of their unwanted passenger. A tragic accident in the Outer Rim, and the embarrassing prince would be nothing more than an unfortunate memory. "Can the ship be repaired?" Zephyr asked, though he already suspected the answer. Chief Engineer Korax, whose loyalty to the crown had always been questionable, shook his massive head. "The hyperdrive core is cracked, Your Highness. We need replacement parts that can only be found at a proper starbase. With the gravity generators failed and life support running on emergency power, we have perhaps 3 days before the ship becomes uninhabitable. However," Captain Vorth added with false concern, "our short-range sensors have detected a small planetoid nearby. It appears to have a breathable atmosphere, and might contain the resources we need for temporary shelter while we send a distress signal." Zephyr understood the implication. They would maroon him on the planetoid, and then conveniently discover that their communication systems had also failed. By the time rescue arrived, if it ever did, the prince would be long dead. "Very well," Zephyr said quietly. "Prepare a shuttle. I will inspect this planetoid personally." 2 hours later, Zephyr found himself aboard a small shuttle piloted by Lieutenant Krex, one of Captain Vorth's most trusted officers. As they descended through the planetoid's thin atmosphere, Zephyr could see it was a desolate place. Rocky terrain stretched endlessly under a pale yellow sun, broken only by deep canyons and scattered patches of hardy vegetation. Sensors indicate the atmosphere is breathable, though the oxygen content is lower than optimal for our physiology, Krex reported. There are some structures on the far side of the planetoid that might be worth investigating. As they landed near what appeared to be abandoned mining facilities, Zephyr noticed something odd. The structures, while clearly alien in design, showed signs of recent habitation. Smoke drifted from several chimneys, and he could see movement in the shadows between buildings. "Remain with the shuttle, Lieutenant," Zephyr ordered. "I will explore on foot." Krex nodded, though Zephyr caught the predatory gleam in his eyes. The lieutenant was clearly hoping the prince would encounter something dangerous and solve everyone's problems permanently. As Zephyr walked slowly toward the settlement, his weak legs struggling with the planetoid's slightly higher gravity, he became aware that he was being watched. Shadowy figures moved between the buildings, always staying just out of clear sight. He could sense their presence, but whenever he looked directly, they seemed to vanish. The buildings themselves were fascinating. Clearly constructed by multiple species over many years, they showed a patchwork of architectural styles. Some sections bore the crystalline geometries favored by the Altarians, while others displayed the flowing organic curves of Zentoran design. But scattered throughout were structures that matched none of the known galactic civilizations. As Zephyr approached what appeared to be the central square of the settlement, a figure stepped out of the shadows. His breath caught in his throat. Standing before him was a creature unlike any he had ever seen. It walked upright on two legs like many intelligent species, but it lacked scales, feathers, or any natural armor. Its skin was a pale pink color, and strange hair grew from the top of its head. It was small, perhaps reaching only to Zephyr's chest, and appeared completely defenseless. No claws, no fangs, no visible weapons of any kind. Most remarkably, it showed no fear. Despite facing a dragon prince, even a weak one, the creature simply stood calmly and observed him with curious dark eyes. "You are far from home, dragon," the creature said in surprisingly fluent Draconian. Its voice was soft but steady. "What brings one of the Imperial family to this forgotten place?" Zephyr stared in amazement. You can speak our language? What are you?" The creature tilted its head slightly. "I am what your people call human. My name is Marcus Chen. I am what you might term the settlement's maintenance coordinator, though we have little use for formal titles here." "Human," Zephyr breathed. "But the record said your species was extinct." Marcus smiled, an expression that seemed both sad and amused. "We have learned that it is often safer to let others believe that. The galaxy can be a dangerous place for those who appear weak." As if summoned by some unseen signal, other figures began emerging from the buildings. Zephyr found himself surrounded by dozens of humans, all watching him with the same calm, fearless curiosity. Men, women, children, elderly individuals, all different in appearance but sharing that same steady gaze. "Your shuttle pilot seems agitated," Marcus observed, nodding toward where Lieutenant Krex waited by the landing craft. "And you appear to be in some distress. Are you here by choice, young dragon?" Something in the human's tone, a gentleness that Zephyr had never heard from anyone at the Imperial Palace, made him want to tell the truth. "I am Prince Zephyr of the Draconian Empire. I have been exiled. My ship is damaged, and I suspect my crew intends to abandon me here." Marcus nodded as if this was not surprising news. The old story. A ruler's disappointing child sent away to die with honor rather than live with shame. He paused, studying Zephyr more closely. "But you do not seem like the typical arrogant dragon prince we occasionally encounter in the Outer Rim." "That is because I am weak," Zephyr said bitterly. "I cannot fly properly, I cannot breathe fire, I cannot fight. I am useless to my people." To his surprise, several of the humans chuckled softly, not mockingly, but with what seemed like genuine amusement. "Cannot fly, cannot breathe fire, cannot fight," an elderly human woman repeated. "Marcus, does this sound familiar?" Marcus grinned. "Very familiar, Elena. Young dragon, you have just described the natural state of every human who has ever lived. We cannot do any of those things, yet somehow we have managed to survive in places where most superior species cannot." "But how?" Zephyr asked desperately. "How do you survive without natural weapons or defenses?" "Come," Marcus said, gesturing toward the settlement. "Let us show you. But first we should deal with your shuttle pilot before he does something unfortunate." As they walked back toward the landing craft, Zephyr noticed Lieutenant Krex had powered up the shuttle's weapon systems and was scanning the settlement with obvious hostile intent. "Lieutenant," Zephyr called out, "stand down your weapons immediately." Krex turned toward them, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm as he saw the humans surrounding the prince. "Your Highness, you are in danger. These creatures could be hostile." "The only hostility I see," Marcus said calmly, "is coming from your weapons systems. Please power them down before someone gets hurt." "I take orders only from dragons." Krex snarled, his finger moving toward the firing controls. What happened next was so fast that Zephyr almost missed it. The settlement erupted with activity, as humans scattered with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, the shuttle was surrounded by figures carrying weapons that Zephyr didn't recognize, sleek devices that hummed with contained energy. "Last warning," Marcus said, his voice still calm but now carrying an undertone of steel. "Power down your weapons." Krex looked around at the armed humans and made a fatal miscalculation. Believing these small, weak-looking creatures posed no real threat, he activated the shuttle's primary cannon. The weapon never fired. A brilliant blue beam struck the shuttle from at least 6 different directions simultaneously, overloading its shields and frying its electronics in an instant. Krex barely had time to scream before emergency foam flooded the cockpit to prevent an explosion. "Well," Marcus said with a sigh, "I suppose you will be staying with us longer than originally planned." The shuttle's systems died with a series of electronic whimpers, leaving Lieutenant Krex trapped inside the cockpit by hardened emergency foam. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, Zephyr could see the dragon officer's eyes wide with shock and fear. The supposedly primitive humans had neutralized a military-grade Imperial shuttle in seconds. "Is he injured?" Zephyr asked, surprised to find himself concerned for the welfare of someone who had clearly intended to abandon him. Marcus approached the disabled craft with a small scanning device. "Physically, he is fine. The foam will dissolve in a few hours and he will be free to leave. However, his shuttle will require extensive repairs before it can fly again." "You could have killed him easily," Zephyr observed. "Yes," Marcus replied simply, "but we try to avoid killing when possible. Death is permanent, while stupidity can sometimes be cured with education." As the other humans secured their weapons and returned to their daily activities, Marcus led Zephyr into the settlement. The Dragon Prince was amazed by what he saw. Despite the harsh environment and obvious lack of advanced technology, the humans had created something remarkable. Gardens grew in carefully tended greenhouse domes. Workshops hummed with activity, and children played safely in courtyards between the buildings. "How long have you been here?" Zephyr asked. "This particular settlement has existed for about 50 years, Marcus explained as they walked. But humans have been living in the Outer Rim for much longer. When the great powers of the galaxy decided we were too dangerous to be allowed near civilized space, we adapted." They paused at a memorial wall covered with names carved in stone. Zephyr could read some of them. Humans who had died building this place, defending it, or simply living their lives far from home. "Too dangerous?" Zephyr said. "But you seem so peaceful." Elena, the elderly woman who had spoken earlier, joined them at the memorial. "We are peaceful now, young dragon, but our history suggests that when humans are pushed too far, we become something quite different." She gestured to one section of the wall where the names were older, more weathered. "These people died in what your historians probably call the Rim Wars. When the Galactic Council decided to relocate humanity to uninhabitable worlds, thinking we would quietly disappear, they underestimated our capacity for spite." "I have never heard of any Rim Wars," Zephyr said. Marcus and Elena exchanged glances. "Of course not. The major powers prefer to forget embarrassing defeats. But 3,000 years ago, human refugees turned the Outer Rim into a graveyard for Imperial fleets. We learned to turn asteroids into weapons, to hide entire fleets inside nebulae, to fight wars of attrition that lasted decades. Eventually, the galaxy's leaders decided it was easier to pretend we had gone extinct than to admit they could not defeat us," Elena added. "They stopped sending fleets to hunt us, and we stopped turning their worlds into radioactive wastelands. A sort of unofficial peace treaty." As they toured the settlement, Zephyr began to understand how the humans had survived. Everything was built with redundancy and efficiency. Water was recycled multiple times through biological and mechanical systems. Food was grown in compact hydroponic gardens that could produce more nutrition per square meter than traditional agriculture. Even waste was processed into useful materials. Your people call this weakness, Marcus said, noticing Zephyr's fascination with a workshop where humans were repairing complex machinery, using tools made from salvaged parts. But we call it adaptation. When you cannot overpower your environment, you must learn to work with it. They stopped at a medical facility where a human doctor was treating a young girl who had injured her arm in a fall. Zephyr watched in amazement as the doctor used simple tools and techniques to heal the injury completely within minutes. "How is that possible?" he asked. Even dragon healing abilities could not work so quickly. "Nanomedicine," the doctor explained without looking up from her work. "Microscopic machines that can repair tissue damage at the cellular level. We developed it because human bodies are fragile and we could not afford to lose people to minor injuries. But such technology would be incredibly valuable, worth fortunes in the civilized galaxy." The doctor smiled. "Of course. But if we revealed such capabilities, the galaxy would remember that humans still exist, and then they would want to either steal our technology or eliminate us to prevent others from having it." As evening approached, Zephyr found himself sitting around a communal fire with Marcus and several other humans. The simple meal they shared was more satisfying than any of the elaborate feasts at the Imperial Palace. For the first time in his life, he felt accepted rather than merely tolerated. "You said humans cannot fly," Zephyr mused, watching children play nearby. "But I have seen references in the ancient texts to human spacecraft that could outmaneuver even dragon fighters." "Cannot fly naturally," Marcus corrected. "But we build things that can fly for us. Human engineering tends toward practical solutions rather than elegant ones." A young human woman named Sarah joined their group, carrying a tablet displaying star charts. "Speaking of flying, Marcus, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting a draconian heavy cruiser approaching the system. They will arrive in approximately 6 hours. Zephyr's blood chilled. That would be the Sovereign's pride. Captain Vorth must have managed to repair his ship. "Will they attack the settlement?" Sarah asked. "No," Zephyr said slowly. "They will simply retrieve Lieutenant Krex and report that I died in a shuttle accident. A tragic loss, but these things happen in the dangerous Outer Rim." Marcus studied the star charts thoughtfully. "And you would prefer not to return with them, I assume?" "They would execute me for embarrassing the Empire," Zephyr admitted. "My presence here among humans who were supposed to be extinct would raise too many questions." "Then you have a choice to make," Elena said quietly. "You can return to your ship and face whatever consequences await, or you can stay here and learn to live as humans do." Zephyr considered this. The thought of remaining in exile forever was frightening, but the alternative was almost certainly death. "If I stayed, what could I possibly contribute? I am weak, useless, a burden to any community." "You can read and write in over a dozen galactic languages," Marcus pointed out. "You have been educated in history, diplomacy, and imperial law. You understand how the major powers think and act. These are valuable skills. And," Sarah added with a mischievous grin, "you are probably the only dragon in the galaxy who would be willing to learn from humans rather than try to dominate them." As they talked, more humans gathered around the fire. Zephyr was struck by how naturally they included him in their conversations, how they listened to his opinions without dismissing them due to his physical weakness. These people, who had every reason to hate dragons, were treating him with more kindness than his own family had ever shown. "There is something else you should know," Marcus said as the fire burned lower. "If you choose to stay, there can be no going back. Once the galaxy believes you are dead, revealing yourself again would endanger this entire settlement. We have survived by remaining hidden. And the learning process will not be easy," Elena warned. "Human survival techniques require discipline, patience, and the willingness to fail repeatedly before succeeding. You will need to become someone very different from the dragon prince you were born to be." Zephyr looked up at the alien stars above this forgotten world. In the distance, he could see Lieutenant Krex's shuttle, its broken systems a symbol of his old life. Behind him was the warm glow of the human settlement, full of people who had built something beautiful from nothing. "How long do I have to decide?" he asked. "The cruiser will be in communication range within 4 hours," Sarah reported. "After that, any transmissions they intercept could reveal our presence here." Zephyr closed his eyes and thought about his father's court, his brother's cruelty, the whispers that followed him through palace corridors. Then he thought about the simple kindness these humans had shown him. their willingness to share their knowledge and their community with a member of the species that had tried to exterminate them. When he opened his eyes, his decision was made, Marcus, he said quietly. I would be honored to learn how humans survive. But first, we need to convince Captain Vorth that Prince Zephyr died in a tragic accident. The plan was elegantly simple, which Marcus explained was a hallmark of effective human strategies. As the Sovereign's Pride dropped out of hyperspace and entered orbit around the planetoid, Lieutenant Krex was freed from his foam-filled cockpit and briefed on his story. You will tell Captain Vorth that Prince Zephyr insisted on exploring a deep canyon system alone, Marcus instructed the still-shaken dragon officer. When you went to retrieve him, you found evidence of a cave-in. His body was buried under several tons of rock, impossible to recover. Krex nodded nervously. He had seen enough of human capabilities to know that cooperation was his only chance of leaving this place alive. And the shuttle damage? Atmospheric electrical storm, Sarah said smoothly. Quite common in this system. Your shield generators were damaged during atmospheric entry, and the storm overloaded your systems when you tried to assist in the search. To make the story convincing, the humans had actually created the evidence. Using mining charges left behind by previous inhabitants, they had triggered a controlled collapse in a nearby canyon. Zephyr's personal effects, including his royal signet ring and a piece of his clothing torn and stained with artificial blood, were scattered among the rubble. Remember, Elena warned Krex as he prepared to return to orbit, if anyone discovers that humans still exist because of your report, we will find you. The galaxy is large, but not large enough to hide from people who have made survival their specialty. As Krex's repaired shuttle lifted off, Zephyr watched from concealment within the settlement. It felt strange to witness his own death, to see his former life disappear into the void of space. Within hours, word would reach the Imperial Palace that the embarrassing prince had finally been eliminated by the dangers of the Outer Rim. Any regrets? Marcus asked, joining him at the observation post. Only that I waited so long to escape, Zephyr replied honestly. Over the following weeks, Zephyr began his education in human survival. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Rather than lectures and theoretical knowledge, the humans taught through practical application. His first lesson was in the workshop, where he learned to repair basic equipment. Dragon engineering relies on overwhelming resources and advanced materials, explained Jack, the settlement's chief engineer. Human engineering assumes you have nothing but scrap and creativity. Zephyr's weak hands struggled with the delicate tools at first, but he discovered that his smaller size was actually an advantage when working with complex electronics. His royal education in mathematics and physics, previously considered useless for a warrior prince, proved invaluable when learning about power systems and structural engineering. The physical training was harder. Humans had developed exercise techniques that maximized efficiency while minimizing energy expenditure. Zephyr learned that strength was less important than endurance, and that proper technique could allow a weak individual to accomplish tasks that seemed impossible. Your brother could probably tear apart a shuttle with his bare claws, noted Lisa, the settlement's fitness coordinator, as she taught Zephyr proper lifting techniques. But could he maintain precise control for 8 hours straight while performing delicate repairs in zero gravity? Most challenging was the psychological adjustment. Dragons were taught to dominate their environment through force and fear. Humans survived by understanding their environment and working within its limitations. Where a dragon would blast through an obstacle, humans found ways around, under, or through it using patience and cleverness. Your people see compromise as weakness, Marcus observed during one of their evening discussions. Humans see it as efficiency. Why waste energy fighting a battle you cannot win when you can achieve your goals through cooperation? 3 months into his stay, Zephyr faced his first real test. The settlement's water recycling system suffered a critical failure during a period when the backup systems were offline for maintenance. Without immediate repairs, the entire community would face dehydration within days. The problem was located deep within the recycling plant's core, in a space too small for any adult human to access. The narrow maintenance shaft was barely wide enough for a child, but filled with high-voltage electrical components that made it too dangerous for anyone without technical knowledge. I can do it, Zephyr volunteered, studying the schematics. His smaller dragon physiology would allow him to fit through the access tunnel, and his education in advanced electronics would help him understand the complex systems. "Are you certain?" Jack asked. "One mistake in there and you could be electrocuted or trapped by a system lockdown." "Humans taught me that fear of failure is less important than the consequences of not trying," Zephyr replied. "If I do nothing, everyone dies of thirst. If I fail, only I die. The mathematics are clear. The repair took 6 hours of painstaking work in cramped, dangerous conditions. Zephyr had to reroute power systems, replace damaged components, and recalibrate sensors while lying on his back in a space barely larger than his body. His weak muscles screamed with fatigue, but he persisted. When clean water finally began flowing again, the settlement erupted in celebration. For the first time in his life, Zephyr had accomplished something that no one else could do. His weakness had become a strength. "You saved us," Sarah said as the community gathered to thank him. "Without you, we would have had to abandon everything and flee to another world." That night, as Zephyr sat with Marcus watching the alien stars, he reflected on how much his life had changed. "I understand now why the ancient text described humans with fear," he said. "You do not win through strength, but through refusal to accept defeat." "Adaptive persistence," Marcus agreed. "When you cannot change the universe to suit your needs, you change yourself to survive in the universe that exists." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert from the settlement's communications center. Long-range sensors had detected multiple ships entering the system, military vessels flying the colors of several different galactic powers. "This is not good," Elena said as she joined them with the sensor reports. "Imperial Draconian cruisers, Altarian battleships, and Zentoran destroyers. Someone has revealed our location." Sarah burst into their gathering, her face pale with urgency. "We have an incoming transmission. It is being broadcast on all emergency frequencies." They hurried to the communication center, where other humans were already gathering around the main display screen. The image that appeared made Zephyr's blood freeze. Prince Korath, his elder brother, stared out from the screen with cold triumph in his eyes. Behind him stood Captain Vorth and Lieutenant Krex, both looking extremely uncomfortable. "Attention, inhabitants of the Epsilon 7 planetoid," Korath announced. "I am Prince Korath of the Draconian Empire. We have reliable intelligence that my brother, Prince Zephyr, is alive and hiding among you." The humans turned to look at Zephyr, but there was no accusation in their eyes, only concern. "Furthermore," Korath continued, "we have evidence that you are members of the extinct human species, which makes this a matter of galactic security. You have 1 hour to surrender Prince Zephyr and submit to Imperial authority. Failure to comply will result in the complete sterilization of your planetoid." The transmission ended, leaving the communications center in tense silence. "How did they find out?" Zephyr whispered. Marcus was studying the sensor readings with grim efficiency. "It does not matter now. What matters is that we have 67 minutes before they begin their attack, and approximately 40 ships in orbit with enough firepower to crack this planetoid like an egg." "We have to run," Sarah said. "The emergency evacuation protocols will not work," Elena interrupted. "Those ships have positioned themselves to cover all escape routes. They came prepared for us to attempt evacuation." Zephyr felt the familiar weight of despair settling over him. Once again, his weakness had brought disaster to those who had shown him kindness. "I will surrender myself," he said. "Perhaps they will spare the settlement." "No," Marcus said firmly. "That will not save anyone. Your brother did not come here for justice. He came to eliminate a threat to his inheritance and to claim the glory of rediscovering humanity for the Empire." "Then what do you suggest?" Zephyr asked. Marcus smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of someone who had spent 3,000 years learning to turn desperate situations into victories. "I suggest," he said quietly, "that it is time to remind the galaxy why humans were considered too dangerous to live." The transformation of the peaceful settlement was swift and terrifying. Within minutes of Marcus giving the order, hidden panels opened throughout the community, revealing weapon systems that had been cleverly disguised as everyday structures. The greenhouse domes retracted to expose missile launchers. The water towers split open to reveal sensor arrays and communication equipment. Even the children's playground equipment folded away to make room for defensive positions. "You have been living on top of a military base this entire time," Marcus explained to Zephyr as they hurried through underground tunnels that the Dragon Prince had never known existed. Every human settlement in the Outer Rim is built this way. We learned long ago that the appearance of weakness is our greatest defensive weapon. The tunnels led to a vast underground command center, carved directly into the planetoid's bedrock. Holographic displays showed the positions of the 43 warships in orbit, their weapon signatures and their tactical formations. Hundreds of humans worked at control stations with the smooth efficiency of a military unit that had drilled these procedures countless times. Fleet composition analysis complete, reported a woman, wearing the insignia of a tactical officer. 7 Draconian heavy cruisers, 12 Altarian battleships, 18 Zentauran destroyers, and 6 assorted support vessels. Total estimated firepower, sufficient to reduce this planetoid to asteroid fragments within 30 minutes. Standard galactic intimidation force, Elena observed with professional detachment. Designed to overwhelm through superior numbers rather than tactical superiority. Zephyr stared at the displays in amazement. You knew this day would come. We have been preparing for it for 3,000 years, Marcus replied. The question was never if the galactic powers would find us again, but when and whether we would be ready. A new voice echoed through the command center. Admiral Chen, all defense platforms report ready status. Planetary evacuation protocols are standing by, but you were correct. They have positioned their fleet to prevent escape. Zephyr turned to stare at Marcus. Admiral? Retired, Marcus said with a slight smile. I was human fleet commander during the final battle of the Rim Wars. After the unofficial peace treaty, I chose to become a maintenance worker. It seemed more peaceful. Another officer approached with urgent news. Sir, we are receiving secondary transmissions from the orbital fleet. They are broadcasting on frequencies specifically designed to penetrate our communication shielding. Someone has provided them with detailed intelligence about our capabilities. Show me, Marcus ordered. A new hologram appeared showing Lieutenant Krex speaking directly to the camera. His expression was a mixture of fear and defiance. The humans possess advanced weapon technology, he was saying. They disabled my shuttle in seconds using energy weapons of unknown design. They also demonstrated knowledge of Imperial military protocols and tactical doctrine that should be classified information. Traitor, Zephyr growled. Frightened dragon trying to save his own scales, Elena corrected. But his information will make this more difficult. They know we are not defenseless. The main display shifted to show Prince Korath addressing the planetary surface again. Inhabitants of Epsilon 7, we have received additional intelligence about your capabilities. Do not mistake our previous offer of surrender for weakness. We are prepared for a prolonged engagement if necessary. Behind Korath, Zephyr could see other figures that made his heart sink. General Thrix, the Empire's most experienced military commander. Admiral Vex of the Altarian Star. Navy. Commander Zet from the Zentauran Deep Strike. Fleet. This was not just a punitive expedition. It was a gathering of the galaxy's most dangerous military leaders. They brought their best people. Marcus observed with professional respect. Someone is taking this very seriously. My father, Zephyr said quietly. He never does anything halfway. If he sent my brother with this fleet, it means he considers the threat to be existential. A countdown timer appeared on the main display. 47 minutes remaining. Options? Marcus asked his staff. Planetary defense grid is fully charged and operational, reported the tactical officer. However, sustained bombardment from 43 warships will eventually overwhelm our shields and destroy our weapon emplacements. Evacuation remains impossible. Due to fleet positioning, added another officer, our transport ships would be destroyed before they could clear the atmosphere. Underground survival is theoretically possible, a third officer noted. But if they decide to crack the planetoid open, even our deepest shelters will not protect us. Marcus studied the tactical display thoughtfully. Elena, what is the status of the Lazarus Protocol? Elena's expression grew grim. All systems are operational, but you know the risks. If we activate Lazarus and it fails, we lose everything. If it succeeds, we reveal capabilities that have been secret for 3 millennia. What is the Lazarus Protocol? Zephyr asked. Something we hoped never to use, Marcus replied. A final option for situations exactly like this one. Before he could explain further, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. The orbital fleet had begun moving into attack formation. Contact from the surface, an officer announced. Prince Korath is requesting to speak directly with Prince Zephyr. Put him through, Marcus ordered. The main display flickered, and suddenly Zephyr was looking at his brother's face. Korath's expression was coldly triumphant, but there was something else there: curiosity. "Hello, brother," Korath said with mock warmth. "I must admit I am impressed. When Father told me you had found a way to fake your own death, I assumed you had simply bribed some Outer Rim pirates to hide you. I never imagined you had discovered a lost civilization. What do you want, Korath?" Zephyr asked. "Initially, I came to eliminate an embarrassment to the royal family," Korath replied honestly. "But now I find myself facing something much more interesting. Humans who were supposedly extinct for 3,000 years, living in a hidden military base with technology our intelligence services cannot identify." He paused, studying Zephyr's face on his own screen. Father would be very interested to learn that his weakest son has somehow allied himself with the most dangerous species in galactic history. "These people are not dangerous," Zephyr protested. "They are peaceful, productive." "Peaceful?" Korath laughed. "Brother, your human friends just targeted every ship in my fleet with weapon systems that our sensors cannot even detect. Our tactical computers are registering threat warnings from sources they cannot identify or classify." In the command center around Zephyr, the humans continued their preparations with calm efficiency. He realized that what he had interpreted as defensive preparations was actually something far more aggressive. "The terms have changed," Korath continued. "Surrender yourself and the human leadership for interrogation, and I will allow the civilians to relocate to designated worlds under Imperial supervision." "And if we refuse?" Zephyr asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then I will demonstrate why the Draconian Empire rules this galaxy," Korath replied coldly. "You have 35 minutes to decide." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. "He is not negotiating," Elena observed. "He intends to attack regardless of our response. The only question is whether he wants us alive for interrogation first." "Admiral," the tactical officer called out urgently, "sensors are detecting energy buildups in the orbital fleet. Multiple ships are charging their primary weapons." Marcus studied the readings, then turned to Zephyr. "Prince Zephyr, you have learned to live as humans do over these past months. Now you must learn to fight as humans do." "I do not understand." "Dragons fight for dominance, for territory, for resources," Marcus explained. "Humans fight for survival, for each other, for the right to exist. It makes us very different opponents." The countdown timer showed 31 minutes remaining. "Activate the Lazarus protocol," Marcus ordered quietly. "Sir, are you certain?" Elena asked. "Once we cross this line—" "We have already crossed the line," Marcus interrupted. "The moment Prince Korath brought that fleet here, he made the choice for all of us." Alarms began sounding in a different pattern as hidden systems throughout the planetoid came online. On the main display, Zephyr watched as energy readings spiked far beyond what should have been possible for a civilian settlement. "What is happening?" he asked. Marcus turned to face him, and for the first time, Zephyr saw the man who had once commanded fleets against the combined might of the galactic powers. "We are about to remind your brother," Marcus said quietly, "that there is a very good reason the galaxy chose to believe humans were extinct, rather than continue fighting us." The Lazarus Protocol transformed the planetoid into something that defied conventional understanding of warfare. As the hidden systems activated, Zephyr watched through the command center's sensors as the rocky surface began to shift and reconfigure itself. What had appeared to be natural geological formations revealed themselves as massive weapon emplacements, their crystalline focusing arrays emerging from concealed positions. "Lazarus is more than a defensive system," Marcus explained, as tactical displays showed the true scope of the installation. "It is a demonstration of what human engineering can accomplish when survival depends on thinking beyond conventional limitations." The energy readings were staggering. Each of the dozen primary weapon platforms was drawing power equivalent to a small star. But more impressive than the raw firepower was the sophistication of the targeting systems. Every ship in Prince Korath's fleet was being tracked by multiple overlapping sensor grids that could predict their movements with mathematical precision. "How is this possible?" Zephyr asked, studying the displays. "The power requirements alone should be impossible for a settlement this size. We learned to think differently about resources," Elena explained. Instead of trying to generate massive amounts of energy, we learned to borrow it temporarily from natural sources. She gestured to a schematic showing the planetoid's internal structure. Zephyr realized with shock that the entire celestial body had been converted into a massive energy collection and focusing system. Tidal forces from the nearby gas giant, solar radiation, cosmic background energy, even the quantum fluctuations of empty space itself, all of it was being harvested and channeled into the weapon systems. You turned an entire planetoid into a weapon, he breathed. We turned it into a statement, Marcus corrected. For 3,000 years, the galaxy has believed that overwhelming force is the ultimate argument. Today, they learned that intelligence applied with sufficient dedication can overcome any amount of brute strength. The orbital fleet had completed their attack formation. 43 warships hung in the void like predators, their weapons trained on the small world below. But something was wrong with their tactical displays. The threat indicators that had been showing moderate danger were now flashing urgent warnings as their computers tried to process sensor readings that seemed impossible. Prince, Korath's voice echoed through the command center again, but this time his confidence seemed forced. Surface installation, you are generating energy readings that exceed the output of some battle stations. Explain these anomalies immediately. Anomalies? Marcus replied through the communication system. Prince Korath, what you are detecting is not an anomaly. It is the natural result of 3,000 years of human development without the constraints of galactic oversight. Impossible. No civilization could achieve such advancement in isolation. Your imperial education seems to have overlooked an important lesson, Elena interjected, her voice carrying across space with crystal clarity. Evolution occurs most rapidly under extreme pressure. The galaxy tried to eliminate humanity through war, exile, and neglect. Instead, you provided us with the perfect laboratory for developing survival techniques. In orbit, the fleet commanders were discovering that their tactical advantage was rapidly disappearing. The weapon systems they had relied upon for planetary bombardment were being systematically analyzed and countered by defensive technologies they could not understand. Sir, reported Admiral Vex to Prince Korath, our weapons targeting systems are being interfered with by some form of adaptive jamming. The surface installation appears to be learning our attack patterns faster than we can implement them. Then we attack immediately, General Thrix declared, before they can complete whatever preparation they are making. All ships, Prince Korath commanded, commence bombardment. Target the primary power sources. The combined firepower of 43 warships struck the planetoid's surface in a display of destruction that should have ended the battle instantly. Plasma cannons, particle beams, fusion missiles, and gravitational disruptors all converged on the defensive installations in a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm any possible defense. For several seconds, the surface of the planetoid was hidden by brilliant flashes of released energy. When the bombardment cleared, Prince Korath expected to see nothing but smoking craters where the weapon emplacements had been. Instead, he saw something that chilled his dragon hearts. The installations were completely undamaged. Worse, they were now actively returning fire. The human weapons were unlike anything in the galactic military databases. Instead of brute force projectiles or energy beams, they fired what appeared to be controlled spatial distortions. Reality itself seemed to bend around the target ships, causing their shields to collapse not through overwhelming power, but through the application of forces that operated according to entirely different physical principles. Shields failing, Admiral Vex reported in disbelief. The incoming weapons are bypassing our deflector systems somehow. Impossible, Prince Korath snarled. No known technology can penetrate draconian military shields without overwhelming firepower. Known technology, Marcus said calmly through the communication link. Your assumption that human development ceased 3,000 years ago was remarkably optimistic, Prince. One of the Zentaran destroyers, struck by a spatial distortion weapon, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, it was there one moment and gone the next, leaving only empty space where a 1,000-meter warship had been. What did you do to the Storm Dancer? Commander Zet demanded. We relocated it, Sarah replied from her position at the tactical station, approximately 40,000 light-years away in a stable orbit around a Class G star. The crew will find it inconvenient but not fatal. In the command center, Zephyr watched in amazement as the human weapons systematically dismantled the attacking fleet without killing anyone. Ships were teleported away. Their weapons systems were somehow convinced to target each other instead of the surface, and their navigation computers were reprogrammed to send them on courses toward the galactic rim. You could destroy them all, he observed. Of course, Marcus agreed, but that would make us no better than the empires that tried to exterminate us. The point is not to win through superior violence, but to demonstrate that violence itself is an inefficient solution to complex problems. The orbital battle continued for another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. One by one, the ships of the galactic fleet found themselves outmaneuvered, outgunned, and thoroughly outthought by opponents who had spent millennia perfecting the art of impossible victories. Finally, only Prince Korath's flagship remained in orbit, its escort vessels having been systematically removed from the battlefield through methods that defied conventional military understanding. "Brother," Korath called down to the surface, his voice tight with barely controlled rage and fear. "What have you become?" "I have become what I always had the potential to be," Zephyr replied, "but only because humans showed me that strength is not about overpowering others. It is about refusing to be defeated by circumstances beyond your control. Father will not allow this to stand," Korath warned. "The Empire will return with greater forces, more ships." "The Empire will do exactly what it has done for 3,000 years, Marcus interrupted. "It will pretend this never happened, because admitting that humans not only survived but thrived would raise too many uncomfortable questions about the effectiveness of galactic governance. You are threatening the established order of the galaxy." "No," Elena said quietly. "We are offering an alternative to it. Your brother has learned to live according to human principles. Perhaps others could learn as well." The sensors showed Prince Korath's flagship powering up its hyperdrive. The Dragon Prince was finally accepting the reality of his situation. "This is not over," he transmitted to the surface. "No," Marcus agreed, "but it is no longer what it was. Your brother has found his strength, Prince Korath. Perhaps it is time for you to question whether yours has been properly applied." As the flagship disappeared into hyperspace, the command center erupted in quiet celebration. The impossible had been accomplished. A major galactic fleet had been defeated without a single human casualty and minimal loss of life among their opponents. "What happens now?" Zephyr asked. "Now," Marcus said with a tired smile, "we return to being peaceful maintenance workers and farmers. The galaxy will convince itself that this was all an elaborate illusion or some form of advanced holographic deception. They will file reports that no one will read and classify the entire incident at levels that ensure it is forgotten." "And you are content with that?" "We have spent 3,000 years learning that the greatest victory is not being noticed by those who would destroy you," Elena explained. "Today was a reminder to the galaxy that we still exist. Tomorrow we return to the more important work of building a better way to live." As the weapon systems powered down and the planetoid's surface returned to its peaceful appearance, Zephyr realized that he had witnessed something more significant than a military victory. He had seen the triumph of an entirely different philosophy of existence, one that valued survival over dominance, adaptation over destruction, and cooperation over conquest. For the first time in his life, he understood what true essay. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Epsilon 7, as the humans had come to call it in their quiet historical records. The galaxy had indeed chosen to forget, filing the incident in classified archives that would gather digital dust for centuries. Prince Korath had returned to the Imperial Palace with a tale of successful elimination of a minor outer rim threat, carefully omitting any mention of humans or impossible technologies. Zephyr had grown into his new life completely. His pale silver scales had taken on a healthier sheen under the planetoid's artificial suns, and his once weak frame had developed the lean strength that came from years of practical work. More importantly, his mind had expanded beyond the limitations that royal education had imposed upon it. He had become the settlement's chief engineer, responsible for maintaining the complex systems that kept their community thriving. His dragon physiology, once considered weak and useless, proved perfectly adapted for work in confined spaces and delicate repairs. His royal education in mathematics and physics provided the theoretical foundation for understanding human technology that even some humans found challenging. The settlement itself had grown as well, Word had somehow spread through the hidden networks that connected human communities across the Outer Rim, and new refugees arrived regularly. Dragons who had been exiled for political reasons, Altarians who questioned their society's rigid caste system, Zentaurans who refused to participate in their culture's endless military campaigns, all found welcome among the humans who had learned that diversity was a source of strength rather than weakness. The morning reports. "Chief?" Sarah said as she entered Zephyr's workshop with a tablet full of maintenance schedules. She had been promoted to settlement coordinator, responsible for managing the complex logistics of their growing community. Zephyr accepted the tablet while continuing his work on a new atmospheric processor. "Any interesting developments?" "Elena wants to see you in the communications center when you have a moment," Sarah replied. "Apparently, we have received some unusual transmissions from the inner galaxy." 30 minutes later, Zephyr found himself in the communications center with Marcus, Elena, and several other senior settlement members. The main display showed a star chart with highlighted systems throughout the civilized galaxy. "What are we looking at?" Zephyr asked. "Revolution," Elena said simply, "or at least the beginning of one." The display zoomed in on individual systems, showing news broadcasts from worlds throughout the galaxy. Zephyr watched in amazement as he saw reports of worker uprisings, political protests, and what appeared to be widespread civil unrest across multiple star systems. "It started 3 months ago," Marcus explained. "Small protests on industrial worlds, complaints about working conditions and political representation. Nothing unusual by galactic standards. But then something changed," Elena continued. "The protesters began using tactics that the authorities could not counter. Nonviolent resistance, coordinated labor strikes, and most remarkably, technical sabotage that disabled enforcement systems without causing casualties." "Human tactics," Zephyr realized. "Exactly. Someone has been teaching these techniques to discontented populations throughout the galaxy." The display showed a protest on a draconian mining world where workers had somehow convinced their automated supervisors to join their strike. On an Altarian manufacturing planet, citizens had used the authorities' own surveillance systems to coordinate peaceful demonstrations that paralyzed the capital city. Zentauran military units were finding their weapons mysteriously malfunctioning whenever they were ordered to fire on civilian protesters. "But how?" Zephyr asked. "Humans are supposed to be extinct. No one knows these communities exist." Marcus smiled with the same expression he had worn during the battle 5 years earlier. "Humans have always been excellent teachers, Prince, and we have never believed that useful knowledge should be hoarded by those in power. You have been spreading human techniques throughout the galaxy?" "Not directly," Elena clarified. "But information has a way of traveling. A maintenance worker here, a refugee there, a dissatisfied academic looking for alternatives to conventional wisdom. Ideas spread naturally when they offer practical solutions to real problems." The scope of what they were showing him was staggering. Peaceful revolutions were beginning on dozens of worlds, all using methods that the galactic authorities had no experience countering. Instead of overwhelming force meeting greater force, these movements were using intelligence, coordination, and the simple refusal to cooperate with unjust systems. "The galaxy's leaders are confused and frightened," Sarah added. "They know how to deal with armed rebellion, but they have no response to populations that simply refuse to participate in systems they consider unfair." Zephyr studied the reports more carefully. "This is dangerous. If the major powers realize that human influence is behind these movements, they will do what they did 3,000 years ago," Marcus agreed. "They will try to eliminate the source of the problem through military force. But this time will be different," Elena said quietly. "This time they will not be fighting a single species defending isolated worlds. They will be fighting an idea that has spread throughout their own populations." The communication system chimed with an incoming priority transmission. Sarah activated the receiver, and the familiar emblem of the Draconian Empire appeared on the screen. "This is unexpected," Zephyr murmured. The emblem was replaced by the image of Sage Corvin, the elderly archive keeper, who had been kind to Zephyr during his youth at the Imperial Palace. The old dragon looked haggard and frightened. "Prince Zephyr," Corvin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I pray this transmission reaches you. I am sending this through channels I hope remain secure, but I fear I have little time." He glanced nervously over his shoulder before continuing. The Empire is in chaos. The rebellions have spread to 17 draconian worlds, and traditional military responses have proved completely ineffective. King Paraxis has declared a state of emergency and is mobilizing the entire Imperial fleet. Zephyr felt his hearts racing. His father commanding the full military might of the Empire meant that millions would die when the inevitable confrontations occurred. But that is not why I risk contacting you, Corvin continued. Prince Korath has convinced the king that you are still alive and somehow responsible for the rebellions. They know about human survival, Prince. They know about the Outer Rim communities. The transmission wavered as if Corvin was moving quickly through the palace corridors. They are planning something called the Final Solution Protocol, a systematic elimination of every human community in the galaxy, followed by the complete sterilization of any world that has been contaminated by human influence. The old dragon's voice broke slightly. They intend to commit genocide, Prince, not just against humans, but against any population that has learned human methods. Billions will die. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the communication center in stunned silence. Well, Marcus said after a long moment, it appears the galaxy has decided to force the issue. We have to warn the other communities, Sarah said urgently. If they are planning a coordinated attack, warning them accomplishes nothing, Elena interrupted. Where can they run? The Empire controls hyperspace routes, communication networks, and supply chains. A conventional evacuation would be impossible. Zephyr stared at the star charts, his mind racing through possibilities. Everything the humans had taught him about problem-solving and adaptive thinking was focusing on a single, terrible realization. There is only one way to stop this, he said quietly. Marcus turned to look at him. What are you thinking, Prince? My father is planning genocide because he believes human influence threatens the established order of the galaxy, Zephyr explained. He is not wrong, but he assumes that the threat can be eliminated through superior force. And you believe otherwise? Zephyr looked around at the faces of the people who had saved him, taught him, and accepted him as family. I believe it is time to prove that human ideas are stronger than Imperial fleets. He turned to Marcus with the expression of someone who had finally found their purpose. Admiral, how quickly can you contact every human community in the galaxy? Marcus studied him carefully. What do you have in mind? Something that has never been attempted before, Zephyr replied. A demonstration that will make the Battle of Epsilon 7 look like a minor skirmish. He gestured to the star charts showing the spreading rebellions. My father wants to fight a war against human influence. I suggest we give him exactly that, but not the war he expects. For the first time since receiving the transmission, Elena smiled. You have learned well, Prince Zephyr. What do you need us to do? Help me contact my father, Zephyr said. It is time for the weak son to have a conversation with the Dragon King about the future of the galaxy. As alarms began sounding throughout the settlement and emergency protocols activated, Zephyr felt a familiar sensation. It was the same feeling he had experienced during the water recycling crisis. The knowledge that failure would mean disaster, but that the attempt had to be made regardless of personal cost. The difference was that this time, the stakes were not just one settlement, but the survival of every free-thinking being in the galaxy. And this time,